Hello. Oh, we're in. Well done, everybody, for staying for the last session. That's great. It's really, really great to see you all joining this debate here, really focusing on that really important thing called freight. So I'm going to just introduce the moderator for this session today, who is Sandra Gehenot, is also my colleague at UIC. And Sandra is our director for freight, but has many years of experience working in real-life freight operations. So I will hand the floor to you, and please enjoy your session. Thank you.
Good afternoon, everybody, and thanks for joining after a coffee break at this time of the day. So very last session of the day, big panel, important topic. I like to say so myself. I have to say, sorry, Mike. That's it. We'll start again then. So again, good afternoon to everybody. So important topic for us. Yes, it's about freight. It's about modal shift, and it's about connecting borders. Now, before we dive into the subject, maybe what I would like to suggest is that if you have any questions, raise your hand during, just after the speeches. There won't be any PowerPoint presentation, but we will try to make it as interactive as possible. So the subject you can see on the screen there, it's quite a long sentence actually. And what I would like to start with is the end of the sentence. So it's about connectivity across borders for freight, digital multimodal, but connectivity. Connectivity and across borders are really two important notions, topics for rail freight. Why? Because the growth of rail freight, it's international. The DNA for freight, really, it's international. And it involves, I think, more than, the majority of rail freight involves more than two actors. So it is key. It is key to have seamless cross-border operation if we do want rail to be the resilient backbone of a multimodal logistic chain. And with this, then we can try and drive modal shift and address the ambitious targets that society, that commission, that we've set ourselves of reaching 30% by 2030, more by 2050, etc. Now, we have a big panel, as I said, and maybe what I will do is start with Conor. Conor is Secretary General, you can see it on the screen as well, from ERFA. ERFA is the Association of Independent Railways based in Brussels. And maybe I will start with a question. And I would like to, where do you see the biggest challenge in achieving this connectivity across border, which we've been discussing for so long?
Thanks, Sandra. I think that's the key question, I think, to this whole topic. I think, what's important to look at, I think Sandra referred to it at the beginning, is that rail freight is fundamentally international. In Europe, at least, more than 50% of rail freight crosses at least one border. And the real challenge we have when it comes to digitalization of rail freight is we have to try and do something with the railway sector that we haven't really done with innovation in the past, which is to start with a truly international approach. When we look at technological innovation in railways over the last 50 years, a lot of it has been national, it's been developing national systems. This has to be a truly international approach from the very beginning. If we go down the road of a fragmented approach here, we have a major problem on our hands because we end up just introducing more complexity to the system. So I think first off, I think one of the major challenges is being able to agree on how we are going to digitalize first and foremost and how we're going to manage capacity. A lot of good work has already been done in this regard. I know within the Rail Freight Forward Coalition, there's the digital capacity management. So on the RU side, there's a vision on the direction we would like to move in terms of digital capacity management. And also on the side of the infrastructure managers, but also railway undertakings, we have TTR, which is a vision on how capacity can be managed. This is fundamental, we believe. I think there's a few figures we have to look at here. The modal share of rail freight now is around 17% when we look at the European averages. And the objectives we have under European legislation is to increase that by 50% by 2030 and double it by 2050. So we have some pretty ambitious targets, and most of us in the industry are quite aware of the capacity restraints that already exist within the network. We heard the minister this afternoon saying how the German network is experiencing significant works and significant bottlenecks. So I think that raises the fundamental question of how are we actually going to get to that level of capacity, because we all know that we're not going to just build an extra 50% of railway tracks between now and 2030. So again, I think another main challenge is, and I think this is where this topic becomes really important, is this is the key enabler for actually allowing us to get to those modal shift objectives, because we need to accept, at least in the very short term, that capacity is not going to be online, that is going to allow us to get to that level. So I think what's going to be crucial in the very short term is we're going to need this standardized international approach to capacity management with a common vision and common understanding of what we're talking about, what are the key data we're talking about, what are the key deliverables, what is the implementation dates, because I think what we need to avoid here is that we end up with a fragmented approach, which, well, to be honest, has been the history of railway innovation for quite some time in many countries. So I think that's going to be the major challenge, but as I said, for us it's essential that we reach this, because without a proper implementation of digital capacity management, to be quite frank, we're not going to be able to achieve our modal shift objectives.
Thank you, Conor. So, well, a lot of concepts here. I mean, to kickstart the discussion, I can see people, already sort of, itching, but so you mentioned about the vision. You mentioned about needing to be truly international from the outset, and about data sharing, etc. So a lot of, and the digital concept here. But I mean, when we speak about the vision and with the, let's say, international outset from the beginning, I mean, we had corridors. We had corridors. I mean, I don't know if you want to take that up, or maybe Marianto. I mean, those corridors were supposed to drive mental shift, actually, from the infrastructure, from the capacity allocation, from a national to an international perspective. Now we're talking about, we're even talking about having mixed corridors with passengers. How I don't know, Marianto or Conor, or how do you see that, helping reach or unlock the capacity level that we are talking about today? I mean, because you emphasize the fact that at the moment capacity is gold, we know, and basically it's lacking. We have problems. So how do you see all that happen? What do you make of all that?
First, we had the corridors. I think that's from 2012, so we're at almost a 10-year anniversary now, and I think we need to accept, and the European Commission has accepted this, that this has had major shortcomings, particularly when we do look at the capacity discussion. Fundamentally, and I think we all need to accept this, today capacity is still being approached as a national topic. The reason for this is because the vast majority of passenger traffic is domestic. So there is an issue there that we need to address, which is the internationalization of capacity management. So the corridors have been very good, I think, when we look at infrastructure discussions and defining what are the key corridors. But I think we need to accept we have not addressed the capacity side of this discussion. This is still something we have to do.
Thanks. I can see Irmtrau, but let's wait a little bit, maybe, because she's about to cry and we don't want that. So let's bring, let's take another angle. You mentioned digitalization is key as well. I mean, you mentioned this sort of patchwork situation, etc. Marianto Zocco is the technical and digital director of Mercitalia Intermodal, the Italian operator. Do you share the view here? How do you see digitalization can enable or can improve the situation?
Thank you, Sandra. Yeah. First of all, I would just take the opportunity just to explain that I'm also today representing the Mercitalia group because I will be more focused on the railways process more than on the operator. I mean, by definition, innovation has an important role in to also to increase capacity and to enhance the overall processes in railways. I think that there is a lot of things to do. So we have a big problem to solve. But I'm pretty sure that with the digitalization, we at least we can leverage on the resources that we have. What I mean that if there is no possibility to recover additional capacity, or before going in, or meanwhile we look for additional capacity, we need to find a way in order to increase this capacity. How can we increase capacity? We know we have a few practical examples. I would like to go with practical example because then it also allows us to progress in the discussion. One is leveraging on the side of digitalization, and it means creating a common platform where we can share all the data. As you know, Sandra, we have created a consortium, so the major railways undertaking with supported also by USA and X-Rail and Rail Data. They have so we have created this consortium in order to build what is called the digital rail platform, which has the goal to manage all the necessary data and to put this data to the in favor of all the actors of the railway sector, in order to review all the process, the process which start from the train preparation to the train handover. As you know, we have a very complex, processes. And today, whether we like it or not, most of these processes are run manually. So basically, we still have a lot of delay in exchanging the data. Still, the drivers keeps the paper documents for the customs, or when we have the exchange of railways at the border. So in order to optimize and to synchronize this data exchange and to shorten the transport time, it's important to leverage on digitalization. So this platform, which will be ready by 2025, will enable a lot of functionalities which will be run through the automatic exchange of the data, enabling this I would say, more automated process. I could give some further example, but I think that it's enough. Maybe we can leave open the discussion. Then maybe we can even talk of other possibilities that we are experiencing in order to gain capacity. But probably we can leave the floor to the other colleagues for the time being.
Okay. Thank you very much, Marianto. So, I mean, here first we heard the importance of capacity, and cross-border planning. We heard for the success of freight and for driving modal shift towards rail that we need connectivity also in terms of data. But one question may be, I mean, we heard how fragmented the landscape is.
Yeah.
I mean, with this platform, how do you expect to overcome this fragmentation? Will you mentioned that a few, legacy players, so driving this change, how do you expect this to work? I mean, is it designed for all railways, smaller railways? You know, how do you see it?
Yeah, this digital platform is designed for all the railways, but not only railways, but I would say for all the actors. The main goal is to lower also the cost and then to have a standardization in the transmission. So all the data transmissions and message will be compliant with the TAF TSI. And of course, this will help because will be a tool for, especially for small railways undertaking that they do not have, for instance, very say enhanced IT systems. And the goal is to share the data with all the actors. And basically, the goal is to allow all the actors to access to the necessary information at the proper moment according to the state of the process. So it means during the train preparation, during the transport, during the handover, and the delivery of the arrival of the train at destinations. So this is the platform that in the future could be also integrated with other, I would say, let's call database or platform. For instance, just to give an example, today still the data related to the wagons are manually, you'd say, exchanged by emails. We expect that we can retrieve the information of the wagons from the GCU broker, for instance. And in this case, I mean, we have an integrated information. So it means that when we need to plan a transport, we can get immediately the information of the rolling stock, and we don't need to spend time in calls or emails, because we already have a picture, and above all, the picture is integrated, so we can operate the train with this information.
Okay, so I'm sure we'll come back to that. Maybe there will be questions afterwards. But I mean, here I think we're talking about something. I mean, you were mentioning a vision, but actually it's something, if I'm not mistaken, which is not far off. We're not talking medium term.
We're talking beginning, I would say, by 25. So we are talking end of 24. By 25, by the way, should be ready.
And maybe we could have a different testimony, but I mean, very much in line with digitalization and the very short term addressing a type of crisis, actually, if I may say, which was the Brexit. So sort of crisis situation. And we have Michel Boudoussier with us here, who is coming from Getlink, former Eurotunnel. So there in a fairly, well, I won't say short period of time, because I mean, it took some ups and downs, you know, in the UK before we got to this. But basically, you still had to find solutions for your customers and to make sure that rail didn't, let's say, fall out the window. How did you address this?
Yes, thank you very much. The testimony I want to deliver this afternoon is an experience. It's based on experience, and it's based on a success that we have achieved to tackle with the Brexit. Eurotunnel, as you know, as you can imagine, is very concerned about borders, because we are a border, in fact, between the UK and France and beyond the continent. Of course, before the Brexit, we were very happy. We were transporting every year 1.7 million trucks per year. So it gives an idea about the volume of the traffic and of the flow that we have to address every year. And the key word for us was fluidity, because we know that for intermodal, the competition is with the road, and that, of course, fluidity is absolutely necessary if we want to be competitive. So, 6 years ago, very suddenly and very surprisingly, Brexit is voted in the UK in June 2016. Well, we know that we had some time to get prepared. Well, maybe everyone knows what will follow, all the history, which kind of Brexit, all the political issues with the UK government. And what we have started, we have started two things. First of all, we have insisted a lot upon fluidity, both to the EU, to the French government, and of course to the British government, saying that, well, we are representing 25% of the commerce, of the trade between the continent and the UK, and so we must keep fluidity, otherwise there will be a problem with the British and the European economy. Fluidity is a key factor. That's what we have repeated to all the stakeholders, the customs, the governments at political and technical level. Second thing that we have done is to explore how this issue is addressed elsewhere. Well, we started saying that we are a border, but there are other borders, of course. There were borders inside Europe in the past, and there are borders, of course, between Europe and the rest of the world. But what very quickly, very shortly, what appeared is that it's very difficult to find, to benchmark a solution and to adapt such a solution to us. Why? Because when we are looking at harbors, for instance, well, of course, there are many volumes in Rotterdam, in Anvers, and in every large European port. But what they have to do is to address the custom issue, well, in three weeks, which is a time for a ship to go from China, for instance, to Europe. For us, it's 35 minutes. We have looked at what was the situation with before, of course, Europe construction, because there were, of course, already rail freight at this time. But what we have discovered is that there is a big difference between us and the railways at this time, is that we are transporting trucks without knowing what is inside, which was not, of course, the case of the railways company before, of course, the European construction. So, at the end, not finding a solution, we have insisted a lot and upon the governments, and the governments have invented a specific concept to address and to combine, of course, custom checks and of course, fluidity. It has been built very shortly, between the end of 2018 and the effective Brexit on the 1st of January 2021. And it is based on the registration of all the customs documents when the trucks are arriving on our terminals. And during the 35 minutes, all this data, because when we have scanned, of course, QR code of the customs document, all these data are sent to the customs authority, and they say if they want to check or not the truck. If they do not want, there is a green light at the arrival on the other terminal, and the truck can continue. And if there is a number light, of course, the truck must go to a specific custom center that we have built. So it's not only digital, it's also assets that we have built for the French customs to check, of course, the goods inside the truck. What appears at the end, after nearly 2 years of experience, is that it works. Of course, there have been, as you can imagine, the COVID crisis just in the middle of that. But I will say that now, when things are getting normal, more or less normal, we can check that at very high volume, it works perfectly, and that we have kept our fluidity. What is very interesting about that, of course, well, I am speaking of the past, but well, I wanted to insist that it can be used for the future. It has already been used, I must say it, inside our company for the COVID crisis management, because for the COVID, well, it's another part of our activity which is oriented on passenger, but it's exactly the same problem. We have to check passengers to check if they are properly vaccinated before crossing and entering on the other territory. And we are quite using the same system, well, in cooperation with the sanitary authorities to check the COVID passes. What we have also found with this approach is that we must have a more thorough knowledge of what the trucks on our shuttles are transporting. And what we want to build with that is something which is close to what Marina has explained, to provide data about and to be a part of the data chain for the transport chain. And I think that it's very important, and we think that we can create a lot of value for our customers around this concept. There is still however, a remaining question, which are the sanitary controls for the goods, because it's very based on very old-fashioned IT tools. It's clearly an issue at European scale, and I think that for ERFA it can be also a good issue to address, because it can be it's very old-fashioned how the goods are controlled for sanitary reasons. Of course, these controls are very important for the health and safety of the European populations, but we think that we can improve things with, of course, the right sanitary authorities in every state member. Taking as an example what we have done with the customs authorities. So that's my testimony. With digital, we can do a lot, and including address a strategic issue, because it was clearly Brexit for us a strategic issue. And we can also invent tools to go further and to open new doors for the future.
Thank you very much, Michel. You briefly mentioned the customer. How did they? What was their role in all this? How did you iterate with them? How did you?
It's quite interesting because, well, our customers initially were the transporters, exactly. Not the shippers. Mm-hmm. But more and more, the transporter take our example as a competitive argument to their own customers, to the shippers. And so we have developed more and more closer relation with shippers. For instance, to give you an example, you know that in the UK there is a lot of car industry, which is mainly owned by German companies. And initially, we had contacts with the transporters who were transporting spare parts or cars. But at the end, we have also developed contacts with BMW, well, to mention a well-known brand, because they were interested to understand how, using Eurotunnel, their transporter can address, of course, the Brexit issue.
Okay, thank you very much. So, crisis in which you try and find a solution involving your customers, multimodal approach. So very, time-wise, it was very pressing. And also the authorities which actually enabled and helped and collaborated. So this is a trio, a successful trio. We heard about capacity before, and your aim, behind all that was fluidity, so fluidity in order to avoid bottlenecks and capacity blockages, etc., which is what we don't want to disrupt, or that to disrupt the chain. So you spoke about customers. Irmtrau, Tonndorf here, who is Director Communication and Marketing from Hupac. Hupac is the only customer around the table, multimodal customer. What is your take when you hear this? I know capacity is something that Hupac voiced very loudly with Rastatt a few years ago. I do remember the rail freight days at the time when you came with your fleece jacket saying never again. So I do remember that. So good communication, but how far do you think we've gone, and or not?
Well, thank you very much. I found it very inspiring to hear this example of a big problem that was a crisis that has been solved by a very constructive approach. And that can also be interesting for the future, because from there you can build up other things. And as far as we live it in this moment, we are right in the middle of a crisis, of a capacity crisis. We are here in Germany. Germany is in the middle of Europe, and Germany is the problem in this moment for our sector. We heard it earlier also from the minister. I'm not blaming anyone. I'm German. I live in Italy. I work in Switzerland. And now we are having a big problem in Germany with capacity. And I think that there's not enough awareness that this is a crisis. And I get nervous when I hear talking about Green Deal aims in 2030, 2050. If our issue today is to survive the next few years, without our customers being forced to migrate to other ways of transport. Because, okay, we might be the customer of the railway systems, but we, on our turn, have customers and customers of the customers and so on. In April, we experienced construction work on the Rhine Valley, and no more than 50% of our trains were able to run for a whole month. And we are having again and again construction sites like this. And if you tell your customers that, okay, for a whole month or 1.5 months, there will be no train on the normal line, on the deviation route, if everything is fine, there will be at maximum 30% of capacity of trains that will be able to run. So that's a no-brainer. It's not possible to work that way. And this is and I do not have the perception that this is seen and solved as a crisis with an approach where everyone tries to do whatever is possible to overcome a situation like this, because there are means that can help. It's clear that we need construction works. It's clear that we need to maintain and also to build new lines, but we cannot kill the market. We should not kill the market in the meantime. So therefore, if I have a deviation route where a diesel locomotive is needed, I could expect that the infrastructure manager has there 4 or 5 diesel locomotives to make the shuttle service to help it. I have a deviation route via France, and I only have German loco drivers, and it takes me 60 days to have the training in order to give him route knowledge or language. I cannot take out, I understand that a railway undertaking cannot take out 10 loco drivers for 2 months from the normal business to make them learn to go via France and then have this situation for 1 month. That's not viable. So can we arrive, and this would be the creative approach, can we arrive to a situation where, for example, for a certain period, for a certain stretch, it is possible to organize things differently? We all know, everyone is talking about, we can have these tools where you overcome the language problem. I understand that it is difficult for 27 countries in Europe to organize legislation differently. But if you have a crisis and for 1 month or for a certain period, for a certain stretch, you test this situation and then you solve or you help to overcome a supply crisis, this would be helpful for the market in this moment, but also an important tool for the future. So I would like to underline that we cannot just talk about what is going to happen in 2030, 2050 if we have a major problem today.
So very passionate statement. Thank you very much, Irmtrau. I don't know if anybody's got comments here, but I mean, indeed, it's very short term. But what would you say then? How can we shape, the future? I mean, not the future because we're talking short term. What would you recommend? That we implement those contingency management programs for now. Because we're talking short term. Then I will ask Conor, how he sees the TTR and all of this sort of addressing these issues, because he mentioned that before. So now concretely.
Now concretely, we need to talk about 2 levels, strategically and operational. Strategically would be good if DBNets or any other infrastructure manager, instead of having a cost orientation, which is wonderful, has a capacity orientation. Say that in normal terms, we need, in order to grow, 120% of capacity. And in case of construction of disruption, we always need no less than 80% of capacity, which then will lead to a fact that we can only drive 70% of the trains, because there are disruptions and switches broken and locomotives broke and so on. But if I guarantee 70%, if I have a capacity orientation, the whole organization of the infrastructure manager will be differently evaluated. And then, of course, we can have operative measures, such as diesel locomotives where they are needed. Maybe also lowering the speed of the passenger trains a little bit, because this will give more capacity to freight. If I have a train that runs at 200 and one that runs at 100, it will eat up a lot of capacity. But if the passenger train for a certain period will only run at 150 kilometers per hour, I gain additional capacity. So there are means that you can put in place in order to help capacity for freight. Don't forget, if you have a construction work, there will be substitution buses, how do you call them? Schienenersatzverkehr for passengers, but there's no bus that can carry a container.
Well, and if a container is on the road, then we have an issue. But Conor, I mean, this is okay, very very passionate, and so we know it's an issue, but if we look at the vision, I mean, capacity, we've said, is really something critical that we're talking about. You mentioned some tools. I mean, coming back to the title about digital solutions. You mentioned about operational solutions or planning and automation systems. Do you think that this will then, improve things?
Yeah, just to follow up on Irmtrau's points as well. The whole reason we're having to develop these rapid contingency plans is the broader way we manage capacity is not correct today. And, the system cannot survive by constantly having to develop contingency plans on and on. So we do need to get to a broader system that works, and we would be quite optimistic that the spirit of TTR is the way to go in this regard. For those that aren't aware what TTR is, this is International Coordination of Timetabling. So this is moving from a stronger focus on capacity management, and this is including works. So what we would like to see, and I think this is also included in discussions on TTR, when there is works planned, it is essential that those works are joined with international coordination on capacity to ensure that as much capacity as possible continues to flow. Why this requires international coordination? Because often these rerouting is on routes in other countries. And for instance, we need to avoid situations where one country is oblivious to what works its neighbouring country is doing. And maybe they're taking the rerouting in the second country out of play as well. So if we can get to a situation where we do have this international coordination of capacity and a strong focus on capacity and works, we will hopefully be able to avoid the concerns that Irmtrau is raising today and the need for short-term measures. Same for digital capacity management. We know today organising international rail freight capacity is quite complicated. It can mean booking slots in different countries, and often this is done manually by contacting different infrastructure managers, and sometimes this is not aligned. What we're doing here is we're losing capacity because the border crossings become complicated. If you miss your slot in one country, you lose it in the next one, and then your train is just sitting on the tracks. If rolling stock is not moving, it's using up capacity. So the fundamental objective we need to have is to keep things moving. Like we see it, I'm quite active in the discussions with Ukraine as well, and we're explaining the best way to create new capacity is keeping rolling stock moving. And it's the same throughout the European Union. So I think I would be optimistic if we're ambitious. I think we need to be looking at fast implementation here. So I like the 2025 deadline. We're not talking a decade into the future. So I think it's important that we push, and I think by this year we really need to have a clear idea when we're going, what are deliverables, and what is this time frame we're looking at.
Conor, many thanks for addressing this double construction works. In April, we had this big construction in Rheintalbahn. At the same time, there were constructions on the Brenner route, as well as via the Kehl route, while in France, they did not accept our wagons because of a database problem. So everything was blocked again. This summer, we are going to have construction works again on the Rheintalbahn on weekends, and at the same time, there will be, in the same period, on the Gäubahn, which is a deviation route. Is it really needed to act like this?
So I know we're in Germany, but maybe let's move the focus out of Germany for a moment, because they will feel targeted somehow. And maybe allow me to give the floor to Andy. Andy Billington, who I would say is the new kid on the block in a way, with Rail Baltica and everything new and investment. So what does this inspire you? What will you, what do you take from this? You get scared, you walk away, you run, or you...
No, there's a table in the way.
No, sorry, no, you're stuck here now, but...
I think the important thing is that as the new kid on the block, as the greenfield development, we learn as much as we can and take the lessons, capacity focus on the whole infrastructure management side of things, making sure deviation routes are part of the initial planning. But also, as we're developing systems, make sure that they're digital from day one. That we don't need to implement paper-based systems, so why would we, if we can avoid that? There was the toolkit on paperless trade that came out, I think, quite recently, which has got a lot of information about standardization, and numeric identifiers for shipping consignment notes and so on. They're all standards that we can build on, that we can use ourselves in the delivering of the whole project. But we are still at a relatively early stage. We do have time to build these lessons in. So, for example, our progress, the construction works have started. Our electrification procurement was launched today, which is a coincidence with this event, but it's come out today. So that's an indication of the time that we do have. It's not infinite. We do have some target dates, but I think we can learn a lot also from processes and from what other people are able to enable with processes, with digitalization of border processes. Obviously, our own traffic will be within the EU. Despite my accent, my job is not affected by Brexit. But we do have similar considerations. Make sure that we automate the process, make sure we digitalize everything, make sure we go paperless as far as we possibly can. And if we can maybe accelerate some standards in the region in that way, we're the region that has some of the most digitalized governments in the world, then maybe that's something that we can actually bring to play as well and help others with.
And the focus of Rail Baltica is more passenger?
Passenger and freight.
And freight.
It's mixed
Okay.
line. And we will have the 230
Customer
kilometre
yeah.
versus 120 kilometre an hour train issue. So we need to bear those things in mind as well. So
So I think there are some initiatives here you heard about which
Yes.
could be of interest for you without
Definitely.
having to start from scratch.
yes.
So we're very happy to hear that. Irmtrau? No, looking at me? Fine. Okay, so before maybe we wrap up, are there any questions from the audience? Or is it the time of the day when you're just thinking about
Ending the day.
the end of the day or the fun part? Although freight is fun. No? So maybe if we wrap up, I don't know, so we're talking that freight needs to be seamless for the reasons we said, because it's international, we're crossing borders, this is where growth comes from. So digitalization is a key enabler, we've heard, you know, and it's helping also gain capacity. So if you had to wrap up in, you know, with one word or one sentence, what would you answer to the question that is posed? How can we shape, you know, how can you make it seamless? What is the thing that you think would need to be worked on? Maybe I will not start with Irmtrau. Maybe I will start with Michel.
Yes, I think that I think that we are at an interesting moment, because I think that with digital we can find a new model for rail freight. As for instance, with digital, a new model has been built for passengers. And what I think quite important is that I can see two ways maybe for this new model. One is customer information, because of course customer information is key for logistics. That's quite obvious. And by nature, rail freight is a part of the question. But I think that this part of the questions must be integrated in a whole system providing information about the goods for all our customers and the customers of our customers and blah blah. So for me, it's a first principle that can help to build this model, digital model for freight. The other one is what have been developed around planning, because the superiority of rail for freight is planning, because we are a planned, of course, a transport way. Everything is anticipated. And of course, that's quite important to see how at a continental scale, planning can help to find solution with digital to maybe to address the new routes and to find always the possibility and the way for the freight to circulate at continental scale.
Thank you. Irmtrau, what would you say?
Well, I would say, I look there, that everyone in this multimodal transport chain will connect and together build more sustainable solutions, even if today we are in a crisis.
Thank you. Connection, seamless, systems approach, multimodal approach. Marianne?
Yeah, I would add best practice, maybe. Just to give a quick example, in order also to check whether this model can be exported. In order to leverage on the capacity, so to optimize capacity and also to overcome the bottlenecks, Mercitalia launched in 2018 what is called the service Mercitalia Fast. The Mercitalia Fast, and briefly, it's a service that runs on high speed, is a freight rail transport for I would say, sensitive products, time-sensitive products, and parcel and express. It runs on a high-speed track during the night, so during the time in which the track is not used by the passengers. This, of course, has been an important project because for us it meant just to modify, to take in the ETR train, to modify it, to adapt the train for carrying these light goods. Today the service goes between the south of Italy near Naples. It's a place called Caserta and Bologna, and it runs every day. It is helping us in would say answering the customer demand. You know, the increase of the e-commerce, of course, requires this sort of services. Of course, this is not the solution, because the solution is the combination of actions, and it takes time also because, I mean, the pandemic, highlighted a lot of other, would say, weakness that we need to recover, to reinforce. But the question is, would be this model would be exportable, for instance, just to launch a message, could be used in other areas, also international corridors. Cross-border? I don't know. No, say, could be between Italy and France, Italy and Germany, or Italy and Austria, or France and Spain, I don't know. Could be used? Is any residual capacity on which we can leverage? This is the questions.
Thank you very much. Andy, what would you say? How could you shape?
There are quite a lot of opportunities, and the fast freight service is definitely something that I believe we should be looking into much as a given that kind of service is going to be a requirement in the future. More and more goods are e-commerce. We have on our route, we have multiple airports as well as the seaports. So it's important that we have some kind of data integration there as well. So if you've got a plane has been delayed, make sure everybody knows, and that's for passengers as well as freight, and it's equally important. I think probably a lot of people here have used sort of air rail integration services in the past, where if one of the two legs of the journey doesn't work, the other one is going to be not as smooth as it could be. And the data integration is possible. The standards exist, but they're not joined. So where there are standards, we need to look for common ground where the standards can be matched and not have mode-specific data standards. I think in future, everything has to become a lot more interoperable, and that makes the cross-border easier as well. As long as the IT systems, the digital systems are speaking the same language, that can simplify some of the other issues that we have with people and language.
Absolutely. Multimodality. Conor, do you want to wrap up?
Yeah, so the bad news is we heard lots of complaints today, but I think what's good is we've heard lots of solutions. So I think my plea is now we have to actually go forward and implement these. The sector has done a lot in TTR, digital capacity management. So the positives I would take is the framework is there. I think we just need to accept the way we're working today is not going to get us where we need to be, but I think we already know how we have to transition to move to where we need to be. So I think for us, now we just need to say, okay, this is clear, and let's just get moving.
There's a wind of change, I would say.
Yeah, exactly.